Tonight, Hurricane Katrina's deadly wake.
The challenges that we face on the ground are unprecedented.
There's no power, it's very difficult to get food and water supplies in, just basic essentials.
It's just heartbreaking.
And I don't know what I'm gonna do now.
New Orleans underwater. The rest of the Gulf Coast shattered.
Who was at your house with you?
My wife.
Where is she now?
Can't find her body. She gone.
6 of us survived out of 14.
As the waters rise, the most helpless victims. Inside a neonatal hospital in New Orleans, the struggle to keep tiny patients alive. The race to rescue those who are still trapped. A nation mobilizes to fight back.
She kicked our butt. She won the battle, but we won the war.
Tonight, in the path of Katrina. Now reporting, Elizabeth Vargas.
Good evening and welcome to this special broadcast from Gulfport, Mississippi, right on the Gulf Coast and right in the middle of the devastation from Hurricane Katrina. As you can see behind me, this is one of the hotels in this town. Semi-trucks have been blown up right into the front lobby, and it's a sight repeated mile after mile along 90 miles of Mississippi coastline, just a fraction of the gruesome aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. We are still just beginning to learn the extent of the death and the damage tonight in the worst natural disaster in U.S. history. Just a few hours ago, earlier this evening, this is what President Bush had to say.
The folks on the Gulf Coast are going to need the help of this country for a long time. This is going to be a difficult road. The challenges that we face on the ground are unprecedented. But there's no doubt in my mind we're going to succeed.
Here in the Gulf Coast, things are so chaotic, it's impossible to know how many people have died. The New Orleans mayor estimates the death toll could be hundreds, if not even thousands. Nearly 5 million people in this region are without power, and rescuers are still going on around the clock. The Coast Guard has done some 1,200 rescues, plucking people from the roofs with their helicopters. But in Mississippi counties, there is a grim sight. Red paint on roofs as a signal to shoppers that people are injured inside. Black paint on roofs where people are dead. And it's becoming, the water here, virtually toxic with disease, fuel, sewage, human remains, and poisonous snakes swimming in the water. In the next hour, we'll go to many of the places most decimated to find out who's helping and who's taking advantage, what it's costing the country, and what's being done for the very sickest people who were already in hospitals. Plus, we'll hear some very intimate stories from our own Robin Roberts and Cokie Roberts, both of whom grow up in this area. And we'll try to project where New Orleans might be 10 years from now, based on the worst hurricane in the past. But we begin all of this tonight with my colleague Bob Woodruff, who's in the real ground zero of Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans. Good evening, Bob.
Good evening, Elizabeth. This is a terrible place. I'm in Canal Street, which is turned into somewhat of a canal. Behind me, the famous Bourbon Street. Just to the left, the historic French Quarter, which is completely flooded. The good news is, if there is any good news, is that the water level here seems to have stabilized. We have seen the water not rise for the last 7 hours here. In fact, it seems to have receded a bit. Nevertheless, people are leaving the city. They're being helicoptered out of here. They're being bussed out of here. The noise you hear is, in fact, another bus being ready for people to go. And residents are not being allowed to return because this city has been absolutely devastated.
New Orleans, almost overnight, transformed from a glamorous world-class city to a refugee camp for thousands of desperate people. Today, the story was one of deteriorating conditions for those trapped in the city, and you could see the sheer anxiety and frustration on people's faces.
So I really don't have nothing to go back to.
In the flooded streets, wholesale rioting and looting erupted.
Drop it! Hey, stop it! Drop it!
Police were overwhelmed as crowds of people grabbed much-needed supplies. Others helped themselves to free merchandise.
People were just looting, and it was just, it's like a movie to me. You know, I still haven't woke up. I feel like I'm in a dream or something.
Inside the Superdome, an estimated 20,000 people continue to suffer from a lack of air conditioning and running water. Plans have been made to evacuate the refugees by bus to the Astrodome in Houston. And the crowds trying to escape the city on their own are finding that roads that were once reliable are now impassable. Those who could reach the city's elevated highways wandered along, carrying on their backs all that they had left.
How long have you been walking for?
About at least 3 hours.
Even as President Bush flew over New Orleans in Air Force One, the government dramatically ramped up its response to relieve the suffering in the city. Thousands of additional National Guard troops, as well as ships and convoys filled with workers and supplies, are on their way.
The magnitude of this challenge is enormous, but the combined capabilities of all parts of the United States government represented here and in other agencies has been brought to bear.
Meanwhile, rescue workers continue to pluck people to safety from flooded-out homes and streets. ABC's David Muir talked to some of those evacuees who weren't quite sure that they'd survive.
There's been a steady stream of Black Hawk helicopters delivering people to Interstate 10 here, I-10 as it's called. And these are the evacuees we've heard so much about, the parents and young children, the elderly who've been waiting on rooftops and in second-story rooms, hoping that someone would come help them. One mother approached us asking us if we had seen her children. She hasn't seen them since before the hurricane. They were with their father.
But despite the many successful rescues, the mayor of New Orleans warned today that the death toll will probably be in the thousands. The misery of Hurricane Katrina has hit the poor of New Orleans the hardest. And one troubling question is why they stayed in the city, even when there was good evidence that this catastrophe could occur.
All our research has shown that this would happen.
Hurricane expert Ivor Van Heerden chillingly predicted that if a hurricane hit this month, it could turn New Orleans into a refugee camp for the poor and the helpless.
Generally, the poorer folk who don't have motor vehicles, don't have a way out, and then a certain portion of the population who are very scared of the looting. There's also probably 110 to 130,000 disabled or invalid people in New Orleans. Obviously, they couldn't have got out.
The other top priority of the day, coming to grips with the devastating flood of water in the city. This satellite map shows just how much of New Orleans has been inundated. The good news, officials say, the water level has finally stabilized.
Water is not rising in the city. And in fact, since yesterday, the lake has reduced its level by 2 feet.
Army engineers plan to use huge sandbags, concrete barriers, perhaps even a barge to plug the 300-foot-long break in the levee. And that's just the start of the process.
Those pumps are probably underwater. It could be as much as 90 days or 3 months to pump all the water out.
Even after the water is drained, Van Heerden says, life will never be the same for the Big Easy.
In addition to finding and helping the survivors, one of the main concerns tonight now is security. The mayor of New Orleans has now ordered 1,500 New Orleans police officers off of their search and rescue mission to transfer them to the mission of trying to find and stop looters. He says that they're moving closer and closer to highly populated areas, hotels, nursing homes, hospitals, and in his words, he says he wants to stop it now. Elizabeth?
Indeed, he has to get a handle on that, Bob. It's getting worse and worse, as reports do seem to indicate. And again, authorities in Louisiana ordered another evacuation order for people in New Orleans today. And we're going now to ABC's Chris Bury, who's on the edge of New Orleans near the causeway, where there is an enormous exodus underway. Chris, what can you tell us?
We are beginning the biggest evacuation here in American history. We're right on Interstate 10. As you can see, this is a sea of humanity. Thousands of people have been lined up here. Many of them spent the day. Many of them spent last night here. The conditions are very poor. No sanitation. There's been sporadic water, a little bit of food from the Red Cross and the Salvation Army. But the people here are waiting to get on buses. We're expecting several hundred buses. You can see a school bus behind me. 350 buses by tomorrow are expected to take thousands of people out of New Orleans. So far, the scene has been relatively peaceful, but nerves are frayed. It's been a very long day. Tempers are flaring, and people have put up with an awful lot. One of the great ironies, we're sitting here in a modern interstate system, and the scene resembles nothing so much as the kind of refugee camp that you might see in a third world country. But by tomorrow, officials here expect to have 25,000 people evacuated, and so far it's going relatively smoothly. It's going to be a very, very long night. Elizabeth?
Indeed it will. All right, Chris Bury, thanks so much. As we've been reporting, the problem in New Orleans has been those 2 breached levees. The levees were built. They were supposed to protect the people of New Orleans from waters as high as 20 feet. What happened? Why did the levees fail? Why weren't the people protected? And did the people living in New Orleans know they were living in a danger zone? Here's ABC's Cynthia McFadden.
It is not the rainwater that came with Katrina that has the city of New Orleans now gulping for air. It is water released from the city's levees, many of which have had water pouring over their tops, some of which have broken open. With much of the city residing 5 to 10 feet below sea level, New Orleans depends on its 350 miles of levees, or earthen dams, some as high as 15 to 20 feet, designed to keep the city artificially dry.
I just remember walking around and being amazed that I had to look up to see the oil tankers go past. And I realized that the Mississippi was above the city. And
Author Sebastian Younger once lived in New Orleans and wrote about the levees.
I was interested in how you contain a river as big as the Mississippi and keep it out of a city that's below sea level.
Residents of New Orleans have long said they live in a bowl. And today, that bowl is filled with 10 feet of water. Here's what happened. The first levee broke during the storm, a 400-foot gaping hole. The next breach, equally destructive, came overnight Monday, creating a 450-foot gash in yet another levee, 2 full city blocks, through which water from Lake Pontchartrain flowed into New Orleans. A third breach has been confirmed tonight. Dr. Stephen Leatherman, director of the International Hurricane Research Center in Florida, spent 6 years working in New Orleans.
The levees fell because the water was too high in Lake Pontchartrain, so the water found a way to seep through. Also, the levees around New Orleans are made of composites of materials, just dumped in there, a lot of it. So it's not a totally engineered solid structure.
Dr. Leatherman says the levee system was a disaster waiting to happen.
The levee system was only designed to withstand a Category 3 hurricane. And you might say, wow, we know this area historically have gotten bigger hurricanes. How can they live like that? The problem with New Orleans is it's a city built on marshes. It's a city built on a delta.
With an estimated 80% of New Orleans now flooded, we asked Lieutenant General Carl Strock of the Army Corps of Engineers, responsible for the levees, whether they should have been built to sustain a bigger storm.
No, I don't think so. We had done the analysis and we felt that Category 3 was the appropriate level of protection there.
Why not a Category 5?
Well, we do a benefit-cost ratio. The cost of a more substantial level of protection might exceed the benefits of putting that in. Sometimes we have limitations on the amount of space available and so forth. So we do a careful analysis based on economics and engineering and determine what the appropriate level of protection should be.
Well, that cost-benefit analysis may not look so good today, though.
Well, certainly, and that's something we certainly need to go back and take a look at.
Expect that this is one cost-benefit analysis that will undergo much scrutiny when it's time to rebuild New Orleans levees. But what about New Orleans now? How do the millions of gallons of water get drained out of the city? So far, remarkably little has been done. The airlifting of enormous sandbags has still not begun, and the city's pumps can't begin to work until the holes in the levee are plugged, and that is estimated to take at least 20 to 40 more hours. How long before New Orleans is back to the city it once was?
I really can't give you a good answer for that right now, but I'd say we're talking months and possibly years, if ever it really becomes the city it once was.
Authorities throughout this region say that they are still focusing right now on search and rescue. They are bypassing bodies to go and find the living to rescue them and bring them back. I'm joined now by Mike Brown, who's the director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. And Mr. Brown, first of all, you said yourself today that there are large parts of New Orleans, parts of Mississippi that you and your people cannot yet reach. How long before the people in this region will finally get all the food, the water, the ice, the tents, the cots that are being sent into this region?
Well, that's exactly what we are sending into the region, Elizabeth, and it'll get there probably, it started moving last night. It'll continue to move all day today. It'll continue to move all night tonight. What's interesting is that we face exactly, not exactly, but we face a lot of the same problems that the victims face, and that is having the ability to move those commodities, those supplies in because of the floodwaters, because of the down power lines, because of the debris in the roads. And so we've brought in the military so we can start doing some airlift into some areas. The president's admonition to me today was that we do everything, that everything's on the table. I've got access to everything I need, and so we started utilizing that today to get those resources into people.
But Mr. Brown, as we traveled through this region this afternoon, we were listening as people called on the radio, a mayor of a town in Louisiana calling on the radio saying, please help us. We see no FEMA, no Red Cross, no National Guard. There is no help to be found. Did authorities fail to properly anticipate the scope of this disaster?
Well, I think what we did was we pre-positioned all the manpower and equipment that we could prior to the storm making landfall. And I think once the storm made landfall, it was still at a Category 5, and the devastation became so widespread that it moved further inland and geographically wider than we expected. And so now we're having to work our way inward from a lot further out than we anticipated.
All right, Mike Brown, Director of FEMA, you have an enormous job ahead of you. Good luck to you getting help to all those people who need it. As we said at the beginning of the show, we are here in Gulfport, Mississippi. There is no power here. There's a 24-hour curfew in effect in this town, but people are still out on the streets. In fact, we spoke just a moment ago to the mayor of Gulfport who said, we're trying to enforce it because there's been such widespread looting in the area, but we simply cannot keep people inside. It's hot, it's dark, and there's nothing for people to do. However, in this region, there are just the first beginnings of some of that relief effort. Today, 260 National Guardsmen are patrolling the streets of Gulfport. 85 truckloads of water, we are told, are on the way, and 5,000 generators to provide power, we are told, are on the way to this community. But one official told us the needs here are so enormous, we're not talking about one day, we're talking about a year. Shrimp boats have long been part of the pulse in towns like Gulfport and Biloxi, where the Mississippi River meets the Gulf of Mexico. Historically, this part of America conjures up romantic images of southern belles and riverboat gamblers, a tradition continued by the area's modern casinos, which can generate an estimated $500,000 a day in state tax revenues. This region is also known for a special kind of blues, spawning music legends like B.B. King, Robert Johnson, and Muddy Waters. His song, I Feel Like Going Home, is particularly poignant today.
Late over in the evening, I feel like blowing my horn. When I woke up this morning, all I...
Many here won't be going home anytime soon, if at all. On Monday, Hurricane Katrina sent a wall of water smashing through the area. It destroyed just about everything in its path. Homes and highways, bridges and businesses were simply swept away.
All I have is gone.
Albert and Laura Lewis climbed into their attic to avoid the surging water. Laura's aunt didn't make it.
But my aunt was with us. She's 84. She couldn't survive because she couldn't hold on to the beams in the ceiling in the highest part of the house next to the sky up there, and she couldn't hold on, so she drowned.
The death toll in the Biloxi Gulfport area is reported to be 110, but officials say the body count is continuing and expected to at least double. Some 30 people are feared to have died in just one housing complex called, ironically enough, Quiet Water Beach Apartments. As for the casinos, the area's economic lifeblood, 3 floating casinos were washed inland. The Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, scheduled to open in September, will have to be rebuilt. The Gulfport and Biloxi area is now a place virtually without, not just modern conveniences like power and phone service, but also without life's very basics.
And I don't know what I'm going to do now. I'm just trying to get me some ice.
We have no bread, no ice, no water, no generators, no propane, no milk, no eggs, no non-perishables.
In neighboring Mobile, Alabama, 2 people are dead and 700,000 without power after water rose 11 feet. But compared with New Orleans, Biloxi, Gulfport, and Mobile got off easy, and its relatively safer ground has become haven for refugees from the hardest hit areas. With so many disasters come a slurry of reporting cliches, attempts to put the indescribable into words. There has been a lot of talk about biblical proportions and the worst ever seen. But just look at the reality now in southern Mississippi. Supply your own words. When we come back, you might not live anywhere near this region, but you will pay for Hurricane Katrina, and not just at the gas pumps. We'll have more on the cost of this natural disaster. But first, as we go to commercial, this is a beautiful part of the country, and nothing shows the devastation more than a look at this area before and after the storm.
Path of Katrina, this ABC News special.
And tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all. I'm on your side. Oh, when times get rough.
Tomorrow, a Good Morning America exclusive event. President Bush, Diane Sawyer, crisis on the Gulf Coast.
The human cost of this disaster is impossible at this point to imagine, but we're already getting some estimates from insurance companies on the dollar amount of Hurricane Katrina. $25 billion is the estimate as it stands right now, but that price could even double once you include uninsured losses. There are estimates that 30 to 40% of the homeowners in this region had no insurance. And as ABC's Jim Avila reports, we will all pay for that price in the country and not just at the gas pumps.
Newark, New Jersey, 1,300 miles from America's Gulf Coast, where no hurricane winds blew or tropical storm waters fell. Katrina is still at the gas pump. In one day, the price of a gallon of gasoline jumped 50 cents here. Cost for this SUV fill-up was more than $100, with pump prices over $3. Closer to the disaster, there are already gas lines. This is Mobile, Alabama. And in Atlanta, there is a real chance stations will begin to run out of gas as soon as this Labor Day weekend.
I think there's a real possibility that we could see spot shortages. We could see prices go through the roof. And I've never seen the oil industry take this type of a hit in such a short period of time.
What's going on? 10% of America's oil is refined along the Gulf Coast, and Hurricane Katrina has damaged much of the infrastructure there. Infrastructure that turns oil to gasoline and then distributes it across the country. 9 Gulf refineries are shut down. Nearly 60% of the manned oil platforms have been evacuated. And 2 major pipelines delivering hundreds of millions of gallons of fuel to the Northeast have not had the electrical power to operate. The good news is that the Katrina factor is likely to be short-term. Those pipelines will be fully functional as early as the weekend. Which brings us to the second biggest Katrina factor on the U.S. economy, shipping, something we may never think about. Getting everything from grain to plywood down the Mississippi River and out to sea. $2.5 billion worth of stuff a year flowing right through America's largest port, New Orleans, now closed. Again, most economists see this as a nasty but short-term problem.
I think the pipelines will probably come back on stream fairly fast. I think there'll be a huge focus, as with the port, in actually getting the refineries up working again.
But while the national impact of Katrina may be brief, its effect on New Orleans may not be. Robert Muirwood, a risk evaluator for insurance companies, says this hurricane exposed one of America's great cities as a terribly risky place to live and do business.
Should there be a New Orleans as it is now?
People may simply decide it's too expensive to continue to build the protections to allow people to live below sea level in this kind of way, and that at some point it may be better to actually relocate those people somewhere else.
Making this risk evaluator wonder if once the Katrina factor at the gas pump goes away and Americans are back in their cars, will there be a New Orleans as we know it to drive to?
We are here, incidentally, at the beach View, Best Western, and all of these semi-trucks that you see actually practically sitting in the lobby of this old hotel were parked across the street, and the force of the hurricane blew them all the way across the street and into the lobby, turning them upside down along the way several times. Just part of the devastation. The Gulf Coast and this entire region is very close to two of our own staffers at ABC News. Both Cokie Roberts and Robin Roberts grew up in this area. Cokie has decades of family ties in New Orleans, and Robin is from a small town here near me on the coast of Mississippi. Barbara Walters has more on these two staffers and their reminiscences about this region and the loss.
We moved to Biloxi from Izmir, Turkey, after my dad, an Air Force colonel, was assigned to Keesler Air Force Base. I'm the cute little one on the left. My family fell in love with the coast, its antebellum homes and southern charm.
6 years ago, Robin Roberts returned to her picturesque hometown, reporting for Good Morning America. 2 days ago, Robin returned to a different hometown, one ravaged by the fury of Hurricane Katrina.
Mississippi's governor says it looks like Hiroshima. 90% of waterfront structures in Biloxi and Gulfport destroyed.
For any reporter, this was a difficult assignment, but for Robin, it was personal.
When I arrived early Tuesday morning on the Gulf Coast, the first thing I wanted to do was find my mom and my sister and my nieces. That was my consuming thought. And getting to them had to pass such destruction, devastation. I was not prepared to see that type of destruction. I wasn't prepared for it. This is Gulfport. It was one of my favorite restaurants. It is completely gone. And I wasn't in denial, having gone through Camille, but never thought I'd see something like this. Never thought the Gulf Coast, my home, would be in such disarray again. I remember 69, I remember Camille, and it took us 35 plus years to build back. I never thought we'd have to start from scratch again, but we will.
64 miles away in her hometown of New Orleans, ABC News political commentator Cokie Roberts also grew up with the threat of hurricanes. Her mother, former Congresswoman Lindy Boggs, still lives in the family home on Bourbon Street. Cokie says that home suffered minimal damage, but nothing compared to what happened in Bogsdale, Mississippi, where many of her relatives still live.
My father's family all lives on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, and this week they were wiped out completely for the third time in my life. At the moment, 10 different families in my family are homeless. So it's awful. This very special place, Bogsdale, isn't there. I can't take my children there. I can't take my grandchildren there. Is very, very sad to me. And then seeing the city of New Orleans, this wonderful, glorious city, brought to its knees this way, just breaks my heart.
Over the last 2 days, Robin Roberts has seen many broken hearts. And no matter how objective and stoic a reporter tries to be, sometimes it is impossible to hide your emotions. Robin knows that now.
How's your family? Everywhere we looked, neighbors helping neighbors, sharing whatever little they had left. This journey took me to special places in my life, my summers, my winters, my memories, my home.
Robin, I know when you left here last night and flew down, you hadn't been able to make contact with your own family yet. Have you done so?
They're okay.
They're okay? Because I know they're right there on the Gulf Coast. Mom's okay, sister's okay?
They're all right. The most difficult thing for me this week, not so good, but it's being so grateful. Being so grateful that your family and loved ones survived. And knowing that you're someplace that you grew up, someplace that's your home, won't be the same. It was difficult to see it, but I didn't want to be anywhere else.
Just two of our staffers who were personally affected by this tragedy, and of course, just 2 of the millions of people hurt by Hurricane Katrina. When we come back, we're going to take you inside the only hospital still open for business in New Orleans, and also some of the miraculous good and the bad. People already trying to cash in on this disaster.
275 hurricane in U.S. history hit Galveston, Texas in 1900, killing 8,000 people. In the path of Katrina will continue in a moment.
These people evacuate in time. Well, many of them couldn't afford to. Others didn't evacuate because they were sick. They were in the hospital already, and doctors and nurses stayed to take care of them. Well, many of those hospitals and those patients are in trouble now. But ABC's Don Daler has the report of Ochsner Hospital in New Orleans, the only hospital still open for business.
At the Ochsner Clinic in New Orleans, the doctors and nurses of the neonatal intensive care unit have been working around the clock.
Everybody's pitching in
24/7 since Sunday to keep their tiny wards alive.
As this storm is headed towards us, obviously we were extremely nervous and doing the best we can to think through contingencies.
Powerful and dangerous storm we've heard.
It was too risky to evacuate the newborns before the storm hit. So as Katrina raged outside, the staff calmly went about caring for older patients and babies that in some cases were only days old.
You having a good dream?
They moved the neonatal unit from the top floor to a lower one.
With the hurricane winds, the higher you go in a high-rise, the more intense the winds are. We just felt like it would be a safer situation for everyone.
The building they're in has stood up to the winds and, for the most part, the water, although there has been some flooding inside.
We've had a lot of water leakage into the facility. Our biggest concern was the structural integrity of our facility, and that has held up exceedingly well.
But these newborn babies are the most fragile of beings, completely dependent on technology that is, in turn, completely dependent on electricity. Little Hayden is 3 weeks old and is alive right now only because he's hooked up to a heart-lung machine.
This machine is his life.
The biggest potential problem is the loss of the power supply. The machine requires electricity for all of its components, as well as a continuous flow of gas and oxygen.
If the hospital loses power and the batteries on Hayden's heart-lung machine run down, the doctors would have only one option.
This little hand crank slips in here, and then you spin it by hand at the number of revolutions that matches the pump.
Without electricity, many of these babies who are on ventilators may not survive unless...
ER Dr. Rachel Moreski witnessed the aftermath of the Asian tsunami firsthand as part of the international relief effort.
It's shocking how similar it is.
Dr. Moreski says the most important thing at this point is to get to the people who need help fast.
We're seeing people snatched off of rooftops with no possessions at all. So the chances that they have the insulin that they need or the asthma inhalers is very slim.
True. And we're seeing reports of people who are oxygen dependent, who don't have generators and don't have electricity, who are dying because they don't have their daily oxygen.
By this evening, most hospitals in the region were evacuating their patients to hospitals in other cities. Many of these refugees are children in need not only of medical care, but comfort. The Ochsner Clinic, too, has been asked to evacuate everyone but the most at-risk patients, which includes Hayden. The doctors and nurses of the neonatal intensive care unit are managing to hold out. Their generators are still running, able to power everything but the air conditioners.
It's extremely hot and we're all, uncomfortable, but, they let us dress how we want, so,
Ironically, the heat that is causing so much misery for the hospital workers is a blessing in disguise for the babies.
Well, fortunately for the babies, it's not as much of a problem. Usually our biggest problem for the babies is keeping them warm enough.
Under constant care, 3-week-old Hayden is doing fine. The maintenance staff erected a temporary tent above his bed to shelter him from leaks that sprung up during the storm. Before Katrina slammed into New Orleans, Hayden's parents had to be convinced to leave.
They did make that decision to go home, and I'm very glad they did because I know they're safe. and they call every day, several times a day. I call them just to let them know that we're doing just fine.
They may not be hanging from helicopters and rescuing people from rooftops, but the 500 men and women of the Ochsner Clinic risked their own lives by braving the hurricane and the flood and the heat, and they are still there for one reason.
I have my own child, at home, and she's with my family safe and sound. But to come here and to know I'm taking care of these kids, they can't take care of themselves. They can't go anywhere. They need us to take care of them, and it makes it worth it.
Anybody who has lived through a disaster will tell you that it brings out the best and the worst in people. And ABC's Chris Cuomo reports that even as people here are begging for food, water, shelter, others are cashing in.
While Hurricane Katrina has given us a stark look at the power of nature, those flooded streets may also hold a telling reflection of ourselves.
The bystander you see right there manages to free the man trapped and pull him to safety.
For better or worse. There's a rising tide of looting in New Orleans. The mostly poor who've been left behind are scrambling for food and clothing. Flat screen TVs, tennis shoes, and weapons are disappearing from storm-ravaged stores. Used cars are being stolen and resold on the streets. Even the local children's hospital fell prey to those looking for drugs and supplies.
Extreme conditions turn a kind of white light on how we act in ordinary times.
New York Times Magazine ethicist Randy Cohen says the hurricane is giving us all a chance to show who we really are as individuals and what we are about as a society.
All our beliefs, all our values, all our assumptions, all our social policies now get to play out in a very dramatic way. Is the looting wrong? Some looting is wrong and some looting is not wrong. Anyone who steals food because they're desperate and have no food, I don't think that even the most cold-hearted among us would suggest that they starve rather than violate the property rights of Walmart.
And some businesses are also contributing to the problem. Reports stream in of price gouging in surrounding states, adding to the refugees' despair.
We just want to be treated fairly.
All the essentials, shelter, food, and of course gasoline are being marked up by the hour. Florida, Texas, and South Carolina have all warned they're on the lookout for gougers. But if gouging and looting suggest an uncompassionate society, the days since Katrina point to a society committed to one another as well.
FEMA's deployed more than 25 urban search and rescue teams with more than 1,000 personnel to help save as many lives as possible.
Thousands of National Guardsmen and dozens of federal government agencies are coordinating rescue and relief efforts. Waves of volunteers from around the country are stepping up. Big corporate donors have already pledged $33 million. Beleaguered automakers are forgiving payments in affected areas. Airlines have pledged frequent flyer miles. ExxonMobil has pledged $2 million to the Red Cross. And ABC's parent, the Walt Disney Company, offered $2.5 million. And of course, organizations like the Red Cross and the United Way are mobilizing around the country as they have time and again to bring the victims relief.
I was always taught that if you can help one person, then you help the whole world.
Hurricane Katrina is perhaps the most economically destructive event in American history since the Great Depression. The last time the country responded with unprecedented sweeping changes to help the least fortunate. Today may demand an equal effort.
Couldn't this hurricane be something that is a historically relevant event that may change how we deal with each other in this society?
The outcome is unknowable, which is another extraordinary thing about such events. We don't know how we'll respond.
While it may take weeks and even months to know the full extent of the damage, one thing is for sure, even among the worst affected, people here say no one is giving up.
Coming up, we'll go back to the Big Easy. Can New Orleans be rebuilt? We'll look at lessons learned from hurricanes past. Stay with us.
You can't touch this.
The worst hurricane to hit before Katrina, and that's Hurricane Andrew. Andrew devastated the city of Homestead, Florida. Homestead has been rebuilt, but what about the people who lived there? ABC's Bob Brown has a look then and now.
After the deluge, after the demands of day-to-day survival turn to rebuilding for the future, how long will the metamorphosis take back to what passes for a normal life?
Do you think people really have a good idea of what they're going to go through
No, I don't. And you know what? I think that's probably a good thing. I think it's better just to take it a day at a time.
Dr. Betty Morrow, with a team from Florida International University, helped conduct a comprehensive study of a calamity that changed how people think about disaster management. Hurricane Andrew, which struck south of Miami 13 years ago on August 24th, 1992, was, until Katrina, the most economically devastating natural disaster in U.S. history. It left 250,000 people homeless, heavily damaged or destroyed more than 46,000 homes, and caused more than $26 billion in damage.
I truly believe that all of us were probably in shock for probably at least a week to 10 days. Just a true shock.
Then came the arduous process of the rebuilding, from the town of Homestead to this housing development called Country Walk, where Diane Squires was president of the Homeowners Association.
At the end of the day, everybody was together, the children, everything. It was actually, it's a funny thing, but during it, that was our psychological boost, if you know what I mean. We could talk to somebody who had experienced the whole thing with you.
But what lay beneath the surface of these efforts was complicated and stressful, and it occurred not just over days or months. For some people, it took years. This was Vanessa Bartow's home just after Andrew. This is her home today.
We went through just every emotion you can imagine. You know, we were grateful to be alive. We were, you know, sad that we lost our home. We were angry, why us? So you really went through a total emotional roller coaster.
Even the change in environment immediately after a storm throws its victims off their bearings. It's something Enid Jones of Homestead remembers well.
Coming outside, if I didn't know where I lived, there would be no way, there were no landmarks.
You didn't know where you were half the time. You really didn't.
Some families became stronger.
Well, my husband and I, while we were during the storm, we just kind of said we love you. We really didn't even think we were going to make it during the time of the storm. And then, you know, afterwards, it was just really, it brought us really together.
But for families with problems beforehand, things often got worse.
We saw at least an indication that there were more divorces a year after Andrew, in the year after Andrew, than there had been. The rate had gone up a little. There's certainly reports of more domestic violence.
Among the good things that happened, says Dr. Morrow, building codes were strengthened. In addition, school systems worked to get children back to class fast.
They felt children were safer and better off psychologically to be in an environment that seemed somewhat normal.
Memories of the storm can linger indefinitely, as they did with Enid Jones' son.
After the hurricane, every time that he saw that it was going to rain or just hearing the thunder, he was almost devastated. So I would always have to have him in my arms.
There are always distinct differences in people's ability to recover.
You know, people talk about disasters as though they're equal opportunity events, and they really are not. Those people who are more isolated are going to have the hardest time. And it's always, and the poor always get impacted relatively more than anyone else.
There was also evidence after Andrew that what the madness of a storm takes away, the sanity of nature can restore. The storm surge from Andrew immersed trees and vegetation near Biscayne Bay. But some caterpillars had crawled higher in the trees than was usual. Scientists from the University of Florida found them the next spring after they had emerged as butterflies, the last 17 known wild survivors of their endangered species. They since have helped produce new colonies of more than 3,000. The Schaus swallowtail butterfly, nearly doomed by Andrew, now back to its cycles of metamorphosis, thanks to unexpected resources that were waiting to be discovered. What's the best advice you can give to a family who's just been wiped out by this hurricane?
To be patient. Even under the best of circumstances, it's going to take not weeks, not months, but years to get back to anything that you might call normal.
Yeah, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just say, hey, gotta do it. Either you fall apart or you don't. And you know you don't want to be falling apart.
When we come back, some unforgettable images of the last few days, some silver linings in a very dark cloud. They call home the city they say will never die. And on Good Morning America tomorrow, Diane Sawyer has an exclusive interview with President Bush on the latest state of emergency. As we leave you with these images, our thoughts and prayers are with the victims of Hurricane Katrina. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. For all of us at ABC News, good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News.
Secondly, we've done some things to help on the gas price. Understand, 8 refineries are down. Those are the factory that manufactures the gasoline. Also, crude pipelines are down, and crude platforms are down. So we've done the following things. One, we've released oil from the SPRO, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, to help on the crude supply. Secondly, we got rid of some of the EPA regulations on blended fuel, which will mean there will be more fuel available, not only domestically, but also imported fuel. In other words, some fuels can't be used at this time of the season because of EPA regulations, so we suspended it. And hopefully that'll have some relief on price.
We know you talked to the Saudis. Have the Saudis agreed?
Well, they'll do everything I think they'll do everything they can. Now, they've got limited capacity to drop the price of crude. The best thing we can do is get our production back up in the Gulf. It's going to take a while. Get those refineries operating and get our pipelines operating. In the meantime, the federal government will do 2 things. One, we'll try to relieve the pressure on supply by, as I mentioned, releasing crude from the SPRO as well as the EPA regulations, and hold people to account if they're gouging.
Some people have said that the oil companies themselves should simply forfeit some of their profits in this time of national crisis. A conservative commentator, popular one, called last night for 20% reduction in the profits.
Well, what I'd like to see is corporate America make sure that they contribute to helping these victims, that there be an outpouring of contributions for the relief efforts. And it's not only short-term contributions for food and medicine. And I'll urge people to give cash. Not to send food, not to send blankets, but to send cash to the Red Cross or the Salvation Army or a charitable, a charity of their choice, so long as they designate their funds for hurricane relief. But there's going to be a long-term need, too, to help these people get back on their feet.
Well, I was going to ask about that. We saw Chris Bury's report about the movement from the Superdome to the Astrodome.
Right.
And the prospect, some people are saying, is of 1 million American refugees in place for a very long time. It's really a 2-part question, which is, what are you saying to them about how far the federal government's going to go to get their lives back? Do you promise jobs? Do you promise that they will be moved back into housing, and how soon?
Well, first of all, we got to get a handle on the situation. In other words, we got to stop the flooding in New Orleans. We got to, rescue the folks, get them out of harm's way, get food and medicine to people, and then take a serious assessment about what it's going to need to rebuild New Orleans and parts of Mississippi.
And can America afford this cost? Because a number of people, again, are saying right now we are straining at the seams a bit. We are paying the war in Iraq and the cost of that in the tens and tens of millions of dollars a day. And do we have to make a choice at some point between what we're doing in Iraq and what is needed right now to funnel massive amounts of money?
Now, we can win the war on terror, and we must win the war on terror. Security of this nation is at stake, and we'll help the people in New Orleans and Mississippi and Alabama as well.
What about the other nations of the world? Are they offering the kind of help that you expected them to help, you want them to help? And there is a report that you're going to deploy your father again and President Clinton again to go out there and seek it. What is it you are expecting from them, and will you get it?
I'm not expecting much from foreign nations because we hadn't asked for it. I do suspect a lot of sympathy, and perhaps some will send cash dollars. But this country is going to rise up and take care of it. You know, we'd love help, but we're going to take care of our own business as well. And there's no doubt in my mind we'll succeed. And there's no doubt in my mind, as I sit here talking to you, that New Orleans is going to rise up again as a great city. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort. But this is a compassionate nation. It's got a lot of resources at its disposal, and we're going to help those people.
There was worry about the levees breaking, as we know, years before, and replacing New Orleans in a situation where you have to have massive expenditures in order to protect it. Do you want to see it in the same place?
I think we'll let the experts determine how New Orleans is rebuilt. But I just want the people of New Orleans to know that after we've rescued them and stabilized the situation, there will be plans in place to help this great city get back on its feet.
When are you going to go?
As soon as I can. Obviously, if a president were to land, it would take a lot of resources away from the immediate task. But we've got people on the ground now working with local authorities to determine what would be the best time for me to go. I'd like to go as quickly as possible.
Some people, Democratic critics, have begun to say that they were surprised that you didn't come back to the White House on Tuesday and start to organize this cabinet meeting that you did yesterday.
You mean the one I organized on Wednesday? Well, I started organizing Tuesday when we realized the extent of the storm, and I said, look, when I get back to Washington on Wednesday afternoon, I want to have a report on my desk and a cabinet meeting for you to tell me exactly what your departments are going to do to help alleviate the situation. By the way, I hope people don't, play politics during this period of time. This is a natural disaster, the likes of which our country may have never seen before. And it's a national emergency. And what we need to do as a nation is come together to solve the problem and not play politics. And there'll be ample time for politics. But now's the time to focus our attention, our compassion, and our resources on helping people who need help.
I'm struck by the fact that the picture that we saw of you sitting and looking outside the plane at this disaster and the picture of 9/11 were so similar when you looked down. Very different emotions for you?
Well, first of all, the devastation that I saw was very emotional. I mean, I cannot describe to you what it looks like to see entire neighborhoods underwater, or right down the coast in Mississippi to see little communities completely obliterated. I mean, it is so devastating that it's hard to describe it. 9/11 was a man-made attack. This was a natural disaster. And so I had a little different sense of emotion about realizing that there are some killers out there that killed Americans as opposed to a storm. But nevertheless, the aftermath is going to be just as serious in both cases. New Orleans is more devastated than New York was, and just physically devastated, as is the coast of Mississippi. So we got a lot of work to do, and we'll get it done. It's very important that there be a logical plan in place, a strategy in place, that the federal government, the state government, and the local government work together to implement, and that's what you're seeing unfolding now.
The stampede in Iraq, the casualties there, the natural disaster that has taken place, do you feel the anxiety in the country now?
Well, I can understand why people are, wondering what life is going to be like. But I also understand they're looking to the White House and other authorities to solve these problems. But that's what a president does. The president recognizes problems and solves them, and that's exactly what this administration is going to do.
Mr. President, again, thank you for being with us this morning live, and I know that everyone hopes that there are better days soon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Back to you, Charlie and Robin.
All right, thanks, Diane. The president's saying we're going to get it done. It's going to take some time, but this is the largest mobilization of help that's ever been required, and it may not come as fast as some folks want, but it comes as fast as people can put it together.
Because Diane was right. The people are asking there, where is the help? We need it now. They keep hearing it's coming, but they need it now.
All right. Anyway, weather. Tony. Tony Perkins.
He's back from the storm zone
I'm back from the storm zone as well, and I have one bit of good news to impart to everybody. What was once a Category 5 hurricane, packing winds of 175 miles per hour, Katrina has departed the United States and poses no further threat to this land. Goodbye and good riddance. Katrina dropped 1 to 5 inches of rain in portions of the Northeast yesterday, causing some minor street, river, and urban flooding. It is gone. Today, along the Gulf Coast, we continue to deal with the aftermath. We will see hot temperatures. Temperatures will be in the 90s. Unfortunately, it will feel like it's 100 to 105 degrees under partly cloudy skies. There will be some storms. That's a look at what's happening with the weather around the nation. Now, here's what's happening in your neighborhood.
Cool start to the day around here. Temperatures dropping off into the 50s and 60s for the first time in well over a month across most of the state of Alabama. Showers and thunderstorms down to the south of us today, and it looks like rain going to be hard to find for the next 7 days around here. 92 degrees, the forecast high for this afternoon. Winds will be from the north at 5 to 10, and with a mostly sunny sky. Tonight, mostly clear with some patchy fog developing. Lows in the mid-60s in town, but in the rural areas, we could be in the low 60s again.
All right, thank you very much. It is 19 minutes after the hour now. Charlie and Robin.
Katrina, not sorry to see you go, and please don't write, don't call.
Absolutely.
You're out of here.
Bye-bye. See you.
All right. So you're back.
Yeah, before I left.
I'd say welcome home, but you were
I
home.
was home.
Yeah.
Mississippi was home, but before we left, after the broadcast yesterday, we went to my mom's house, and Tommy Kane, my photographer, and Larry, my sound guy, were up on my mom's roof, you know, putting the tarps up. People need tarps. They need water. They need food. They need money. They need our help, but it's
I know Mom came through okay. Did you try to bring her back up here?
Yes. I said, come back with me. And she goes, this is my home. I'm not leaving. I'm not running. And she...
Robin comes from stubborn folk.
I do.
Great folk
What do you mean
well.
about that?
Anyway, stay with us. In a moment, we'll have the very latest on the race against time to evacuate New Orleans, and we'll also be telling you about the problems at the hospitals and also what you can do to help. So many people asking, what can we do?
Forecast coming up in a moment, but first, here's what's happening. If you had to get gas yesterday, you saw a nationwide ripple effect of Hurricane Katrina. Prices locally hovered as high as $3 a gallon, despite the announcement that President Bush will release some of the nation's oil reserve to help make up for losses after the storm. Governor Bob Riley is eliminating all non-essential travel for state agencies, and this morning published reports say Jefferson County workers will be put on a 4-day work week. The gas-saving move is expected to last until next summer. Alabama power crews continue work this morning to get the lights back on. There are still over 200,000 customers in the dark. Earlier this morning, we spoke to Michael Snyderman with Alabama Power. He tells us that close to 39,000 people in Birmingham are still in the dark, just over 35,000 in Tuscaloosa. Almost 133,000 people are without power in Mobile. Alabama Power says 99% of outages should be fixed within a week. Only a handful of school closings to announce today. Open Door Christian School in Tuscaloosa has just announced that it will be closed today. All Sumter County schools will be closed as well. St. Francis Xavier and St. Mary's of Fairfield are also closed. Mountain Brooks Highland School will be closed as well. ABC 3340 is joining Compass Bank to help storm victims. If you would like to contribute to the Hurricane Katrina Relief Fund, stop by any Compass Bank and make a donation. Or you can send your donations to the Red Cross at Red Cross Lockbox. The address is P.O. Box 830270. This is Birmingham, Alabama 35283. Checks need to be made out to the American Red Cross Disaster Relief Fund. Please put Hurricane Katrina on the memo line. And a Reuben judge heard arguments Wednesday on whether to continue the detention of a Dutch suspect in the disappearance of Natalie Holloway. An attorney for Joran van der Sloot says there's no proof his client had anything to do with Holloway's disappearance. He also says there's no proof a crime has been committed. The judge has until September 3rd to rule on whether to release the suspect or hold him another 30 days. Prosecutors would have until the end of that period to charge van der Sloot. Right now, here's Chris Conley with a check on rush hour traffic.
Hey, good morning. Right now, we are accident-free on all interstates as well as secondary highways. Do have some slow traffic on the interstates, but just normal rush hour traffic. Do have some traffic lights not working. Arkadelphia Road, right at Finley Boulevard, definitely causing some slow traffic. The support brought to you by Commute Smart, a smarter way to work. I'm Chris Conley in the ABC 3340 Traffic Center.
We'll take a short break, then Jason Simpson is back with the forecast. Stay with us.
Going on around the clock. Good morning, America. I'm Charles Gibson.
And I'm Robin Roberts. Diane Sawyer is live at the White House this morning, where she just spoke exclusively one-on-one with President Bush. And Diane, everyone wanted to hear what he had to say about the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina.
Thanks, Robin. Well, first of all, I want to welcome you back and wish I were there to reach out to you, too. The president and I continued to talk, by the way, after the interview. He said several interesting things. Among them, I asked probably what's a simple-minded question, which is, what about just airdrops of food and water right now to some of these people who are in the roofs? And he said that his understanding is that's not the most efficient way to deliver it, and that there should be a dramatic change in the amount coming in very soon. I also asked him about this idea that the whole economy could be torqued by this in such a way, and I said, will you call for tax increases, in fact, if that's required? And he said there won't have to be tax increases, that he believes that it's very important not to throw a curve to the economy at this particular moment. And I also asked about the question of security in the area and the looting, and he said they're watching it every minute, and that of course he would be standing by should additional troops be required, including military troops, but that no requests have come in, and they simply are going to stand by and watch. And I'll bring you more of it all throughout the morning. Back to you.
All right, thanks, Diane. I want to run down for people the latest developments right now. The all-out evacuation of New Orleans is in full swing. The city is going to be emptied out and may not be habitable for a number of months. Busloads of people have already begun arriving 350 miles away at the Houston Astrodome. The mayor estimates as many as 15,000 people can be taken out by convoy each day, but he also says the death toll, when we finally get it, is going to be very high, hundreds, perhaps even thousands. The city is now 80% flooded, 20 feet deep in places. The water, as I mentioned, no longer rising, but the danger far from over.
And Charlie, also hospitals in Katrina's path facing a life and death crisis as they try to evacuate patients, including babies. Can you imagine just, having a little baby right now? We're going to have all the latest on that situation with the hospitals.
And so many people have emailed us asking how they can help, especially after Robin's journey home. So this morning we're going to show you as many ways as we can that America is reaching out, how to reach out, when to reach out. We're going to tell you how you can help. Melody Hobson is here with that information.
But we begin with New Orleans, and that is something that is on everyone's mind right now. 80%, as we said, of the city is flooded. So we're going to get to New Orleans in just a little bit. And I believe Bob Woodruff, he is now there. As you can imagine, still communication there is a little iffy, but Bob Woodruff has made his way back to the Crescent City. And tell us, what's the latest there, Bob?
Yeah, sorry, Robin, sorry about that. There's a massive operation underway here, but this is still a very overwhelming situation, as you very well know. There's still not enough people on the ground to help everybody, not enough rescue workers, not enough police, certainly not enough people going door to door to try to find the people that are in their homes. So consequently, people that are making it out are being moved out of the city in a massive way. They're being taken out to any place where they can go, because still here they have no power, no water, and no food.
Horror stories from what was supposed to be a refuge, the Superdome. As thousands evacuated the arena, boarding buses to Houston's Astrodome, complaints of disorganization and confusion while scrambling for rides to Texas. And when the buses pulled into Houston last night after 9 hours on the road, refugees told their stories.
I had to do CPR on a lady she was 65 years old.
She didn't make it, and tens of thousands still stranded wonder if they will. One elderly man painted his roof, diabetic, heart meds, need transport.
Here comes the rescue. These two being lifted into the Black Hawk helicopter.
Down below, water on fire from a broken gas line. Convicts freed from their flooded prison as guards anxiously maintain control.
These guys here that have obviously been pepper sprayed or maced by the officers for crowd control.
Not enough officers to stop looters.
Do you think it's okay to take that? You stole it.
But there are signs of relief. Sandbags for broken levees, airlifts of food, water, and people who are wondering how or if their wait will end.
This is a major security problem. Even right here, Robin and Charlie, we heard several pops of gunfire last night. There are reports of about a dozen carjackings overnight. There was even a carjacking of a bus driver for a nursing home. Someone took his bus. So this is a big problem. The New Orleans mayor has now shifted 1,500 New Orleans police officers from their search and rescue mission to the job of trying to crack down on these looters, because these lootings are now coming closer and closer to more populated areas. And he says he wants to stop it right now. Robin and Charlie.
All right, thanks. Bob Woodruff reporting from New Orleans. Robin mentioned the public health emergency that exists, particularly in the hospitals. They are desperately struggling to keep people alive. In many cases, there are babies. The parents had to evacuate the city. The babies are still in the hospital. Some of the hospitals are without water, even power. So how long can they keep it up, and how are they going to get the critically ill out of the city? ABC's David Muir, also in New Orleans, is following that story. David?
You know, desperate is the word you use, Charlie, and there is not a more appropriate word this morning with the hundreds of patients still in hospitals throughout the New Orleans area. We talked with Acadia Ambulance this morning. They are the company that is airlifting many of these patients out of here, and they plan to get to 60 patients who are this morning on the rooftop of the Toro Infirmary. And they're just one group of patients that really need to get out of here. The humidity is palpable this morning. It's almost strangling. It's so humid outside here and so warm. So you can only imagine what it's like inside the hospital room, where there's been no power and in many cases no food and no supplies since Katrina blew through.
This is little Hayden, only 3 weeks old and being kept alive by a heart-lung machine at the Oxnard Clinic. The hospital is already running on backup power, and if that power goes...
If we're on off of emergency power and the battery starts to wear down, then the next step would be to hand crank the pump.
A tent over Hayden's bed protects him and his equipment from leaks. Outside these walls, there are National Guardsmen with loaded M16s to keep away looters. And Oxnard is actually a good news story, the only New Orleans hospital open for business. At other hospitals, things are painfully dire. Those stranded at Charity Hospital say the stench of raw sewage is everywhere.
We have very little food, very little water. I mean, everybody's rationing things. What we're really concerned about is most of these ventilators are being run by batteries, and when we don't have batteries, unfortunately, they're going to die when we have no batteries.
At Methodist Hospital, Joseph West says lives have already been lost.
I spent a good part of the day helping to ventilate some of the patients by hand. I think they lost 3 today.
The neediest patients are being airlifted out as quickly as possible, pouring into neighboring facilities by Texas Children's Hospital in Houston.
And sometimes you feel like you're under control and sometimes you don't.
A command center organizes the massive number of airlifts.
Some of them are ambulatory and walking wounded. Others are critically ill.
This tiny girl needs heart surgery. This 7-year-old, a bone marrow transplant. They have already taken in more than 24 children. And overnight, we're expecting perhaps as many as 150 more. Cancer patient Nash Norwood was airlifted out of New Orleans when his hospital ran out of blood, but he was forced to make the journey alone.
They would not bring his mother with him, and that was very hard. It's hard for her. It's hard for us.
So difficult for these families being separated by this aftermath. At Kenner Regional Hospital, they tried to land with supplies last night for these patients, but couldn't because there were 100 looters waiting on the runway with guns.
All right, David Muir.
Robin in New York.
Thanks very much. The hospital story going to be a continuing one. We'll stay up on it. Let's get to the headlines now. Claire Shipman.
Good morning, Charlie and Robin. Good morning, everyone. Iraqis are struggling to come to grips this morning with an enormous tragedy there. Nearly 1,000 Shiite pilgrims killed in a stampede. A rumor of a suicide bomber sparked panic on a Baghdad bridge Wednesday. Most of the victims were women and children. The jailed leader of a radical Islamic group, an American, has been indicted on terrorism charges along with 3 followers. Kevin James allegedly recruited the others to attack synagogues and military facilities in the Los Angeles area. They're accused of plotting to strike as early as October for Yom Kippur. And finally, for the first time in more than 5 months, Martha Stewart can leave home today without her ankle bracelet. But she will be on probation for the next 18 months, which means she's not allowed to leave the jurisdiction without permission, own a gun, or get drunk. Those are the news headlines at 7:39. Now let's go to Tony Perkins for the weather.
Okay, thank you very much, Claire. We're going to turn our attention to the tropics. Take a look at what's happening out there. We have a tropical depression. It is Tropical Depression Lee, located about 700 miles east of Bermuda. Lee was a tropical storm yesterday for about 6 hours, and that was it. There's also another tropical disturbance in the southern Atlantic. Not much happening there. We'll watch it. Across the nation today, drier conditions in the east and the southeast. Hot and humid. We'll see some scattered storms here and there. Also some rain and some storms in New Mexico and the panhandles of Texas and Oklahoma. We've already seen some storms this morning in Kansas, and quiet conditions out west. That's a look at what's happening with the weather around the nation. Now, here's what's happening in your neighborhood.
Good morning. A mostly sunny sky for today. Will still be hot, though. 92 degrees. The forecast high, winds from the north at 5 to 10. 67 tonight's low with some patchy fog in a few areas. 92 the high for tomorrow. Upper 80s, though, early next week.
All right, there you go. This weather report has been brought to you by Jif Peanut Butter. It is now 40 minutes after the hour. Charlie and Robin, back to you.
Tony, when we come back, a theme of today's program, America Reaching Out. A look at how people around the country are helping victims. And so many of you have asked how you can help, and we'll be talking about that the rest of the morning. Stay with us.
Good morning, Robin. We've been watching the buses come in here all morning. I'm outside the Houston Astrodome, and over the next few days, more than 20,000 of the displaced and homeless will call this place home. And as the people pour in here, so does the help. So many have so little left.
We have no milk, no bread, no water. But ice. No ice.
As Houston prepares its Astrodome to house tens of thousands left homeless, around the nation, Americans are responding to the desperate need left in Katrina's wake. In Los Angeles, children emptied their piggy banks. And in San Francisco, volunteers filled 3 classrooms for a crash course on disaster relief.
The sooner you can travel, the better.
In Indiana, utility workers got a big send-off on their way to help restore power. Checks and cash donations are coming in from all over. In addition to major corporations that have donated millions, celebrities like Morgan Freeman and Serena Williams have pledged their support, as did so many, deeply touched by such tragedy and loss.
I've spent a lot of time in New Orleans, and I love the city, and to see what's happening right there is right now is just kind of heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking for Clarence Santiago and 22 of his family members.
We didn't figure that the worst case scenario was going to happen, but it did.
All are now living in a Sunday school classroom at this Houston church turned shelter, where the donations of clothing, food, and water keep coming.
It made us feel so good because, you know, with the situation at home, we're just devastated. I just can't even think about it, you know.
To give you some idea of how long-term this could be, the schedule for the Astrodome has been cleared through December. And Charlie and Robin, many of the displaced children already here start school in Houston today.
Barbara Pinto, thanks very much. And all morning long, we'll be telling you how you can reach out. Stay with us. Number 1, cash or goods? And number 2, is it better to give now or wait to see how things shake out?
Well, this is very simple. Cash, not goods. There is no infrastructure to support moving things around. The only thing these relief organizations can take is money. That doesn't mean $20 in an envelope. That means writing a check, earmarking Katrina on the memo line of the check, or charging it to your credit card. In terms of now or later, now for sure, because once this drops from the headlines, it'll be very, very hard for these organizations to raise money.
Okay, now and then maybe even more later.
Holiday time, when you're making your year-end tax contributions, keep the major charities in mind because they will still be working on Katrina.
Yeah, the need is not going to go away. All right, Melody Hobson, we'll be back with your emails asking Melody how you can help. And when we come back, Coast Guard rescues. We're going to show you many of those, talk to some of the great Coast Guardsmen, and also the gas lines. Will there be gas available? Stay with us.
Jason Simpson will have more on the forecast in a moment. But
More than 2,000 people, and the National Guard, many more as well. It is a scene being played out over and over and over again, nighttime, daytime, the signs on the roofs saying, "Help me."
Come and Get Me.
Good morning, America. Good to have you with us.
It is Thursday, September 1st, 2005. You see Diane there. She's still in Washington. Just early this morning, she spoke live, one-on-one with President Bush this morning. It was something to see and hear. Diane.
That's right, Robin. And of course, among the things he said to me was very emotionally how much he cares about the people down in the Gulf states. But he also said that there will be zero tolerance for any looting taking place down there, and that he's standing by with any number of forces that might be requested by governors should it be needed to keep security. And I'll play you a little bit more from the interview in a minute.
All right, Diane, just to run down the latest developments from the region, an all-out evacuation of New Orleans is in full swing. The city, essentially, when it's over, will be empty. Busloads of people have begun arriving 350 miles away at the Houston Astrodome. And the mayor of New Orleans estimates that as many as 15,000 per day will be taken out by convoy. He also says the death toll in the city of New Orleans, hundreds, maybe even thousands. The city's struggling with an all-out problem of controlling the crime wave that Diane mentioned, dozens of carjackings, roving packs of looters growing increasingly hostile. So we'll get to that story.
And we can't forget about the Mississippi Gulf Coast, Bay St. Louis, Long Beach, Pass Christian, Gulfport, Biloxi, up and down the coast. We're going to talk about Mississippi in just a little bit. We're getting new pictures of the catastrophe as it unfolded. This is home video. A man trapped in his house in New Orleans captured these images as the floodwaters swamped his home. So many compelling images and stories coming from those in Katrina's path. If you have video or photos, especially if you have photos of loved ones that you're looking for, go to our website, share them with us at gma.abcnews.com.
And we've gotten a lot of emails from people as well saying, what can we do to help? So all morning long showing you how America is reaching out, and our financial contributor Melody Hobson will be with us in this hour to answer some of your emails in the best ways for you to help.
And among those giving their all, the heroes, you've been seeing them, they're up in the air, the Coast Guard. Their crews have been just tirelessly rescuing people from rooftops. It seems the work is never done, and we're going to talk to some of them in just a little bit. Oh, those images. But we begin with Diane, who's still in our nation's capital. Diane.
Right, Robin. I want to tell you one more thing the president said to me as we continued the conversation after the interview. I said to him, you know, there was an evacuation order. A lot of these people stayed, and I just was curious. I said, do you blame the people for staying there? And he said, now is not the time to blame anyone. And he said, particularly when you look at the number of elderly people who didn't want to leave their home, he said, how can you ever say to a person like that you in any way hold them responsible or blame them for not wanting to leave their home? Even though, as we know, it did result in a huge number of people who remain there need to be rescued, and of course the refugees themselves, which could pose one of the greatest challenges of his presidency. The prospect, some people are saying, is of 1 million American refugees in place for a very long time. It's really a two-part question, which is, what are you saying to them about how far the federal government's going to go to get their lives back? Do you promise jobs? Do you promise that they will be moved back into housing, and how soon?
Well, first of all, we got to get a handle on the situation. In other words, we got to stop the flooding in New Orleans. We got to, rescue the folks and get them out of harm's way, get food and medicine to people, and then take a serious assessment about what it's going to be.
Maybe we have enough food for another 3 days. Like, you think we're going to come back here and do all this 3 days from now?
So to prove it, they floated me up Robert E. Lee Boulevard to a genteel neighborhood near City Park, where I finally found what Katrina couldn't kill.
What's your name?
My name's Penny Weeks, and this is Bruce Gobert.
Hey, Bruce.
Southern hospitality and stoic charm lives amid the brackish waters of their living room.
It was underwater, and it worked.
It is obvious their spirits are already up.
Oh, I'm so glad we cleaned the kitchen this morning, honey.
He did the dishes, I see.
This home belongs to the Gilbert family patriarch, a former king of Mardi Gras. And while his furniture floats downstairs, he holds court upstairs for family, friends, and neighbors, all supporting his decision to stay, come hell and high water.
Don't you think you'd be more comfortable somewhere else?
I feel safe and I feel comfortable. More so than... I'm not going to be corralled.
You guys are going to survive, but will the city?
Oh, hell yes. Oh, come on. Oh, ye of little faith.
So what is it about this place that gives you this sort of steel spine?
It's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to define. It's a feeling. You know, this is my home. This is where my roots are. My family is. It's not something you easily turn your back on.
I have to tell you, Charlie and Robin, I went in there expecting people just delusional, and I came away really invigorated by their resolve in there. Some will say maybe they are delusional, but it's that kind of unbelievable pluck. They're acting as if this is a clogged sink, and it is just a piffle, and it will soon go away, and that is what it's going to take if this old city is going to rebuild once again.
Oh, hell yeah. All right, Bill Weir, thanks ever so much. And
there is just something about the South.
Bless
There's
those
something
folks.
about the South.
Absolutely. Let's go to Claire Shipman for the headlines.
All right, well, despite those good spirits, everybody, as we've been talking about, Mississippi has been devastated by the hurricane's 100-mile path of destruction. Right now, more than 100 deaths are being blamed on Katrina. And Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour told us rescuers are making progress and they're still not giving up hope.
We've rescued a lot of people. We've found a lot of survivors in the thousands. We believe there will be more. We also believe that there will be more fatalities. The devastation is so total that there's debris knee-deep, waist-deep, head-deep for miles and miles and miles.
Indeed, the governor says he just didn't believe how bad the devastation could be until he saw it from above. The death toll from that stampede in Iraq is now nearly 1,000, all killed as a result of panic during a religious procession across a bridge in Baghdad. They were mostly women and children trampled or drowned after word of a suicide bomber spread through the crowd. And help is on the way for the upcoming flu season. The government has approved a new vaccine called Fluarix for patients over 18. It's made in Germany by GlaxoSmithKline and has been available overseas for years. 8 million doses will be imported. And it seems there is strikingly little difference between humans and chimps. Scientists who've studied chimps' DNA say we're more than 96% identical, but they say those differences are critical and could tell us why humans get diseases like AIDS and Alzheimer's and chimps don't. That's the news at 10 after 8 now. Let's check with Tony for the weather again.
All right, Claire, thank you very much. I have got something.